As we established right at the beginning of this series, there is one number one piece of concrete evidence that believers in the moon landings point to.
What do you think of the conspiracy theories that the moon missions didn't happen?
That's a good question. I think it is just that, a conspiracy theory. I don't think it's... I believe firmly that man did land on the moon. And so I think it's just a little bit of rubbish, most of the conspiracy stuff.
What would be the number one piece of concrete evidence that you'd offer to support the reality of the moon missions?
Well, I think there's two things, but now that's your second question, so you're just going to ask me one. I think that the rock and soil that was brought back, I think, is probably the number one thing.
Well, actually, there are two pieces of so-called concrete evidence.
To my mind, there is no doubt. And the reason I believe the lunar missions must have happened was because I interviewed for the professorship at University of Texas last year. And they showed me laser signals, which to this day they are bouncing off the surface of the moon. They put these reflecting dishes on the moon's surface, and they're bouncing laser beams off those dishes almost every day.
They left a bunch of prisms on the moon that were used to range find the moon. So there used to be a telescope at the back of Canberra called the Aurora Valley Laser Tracking Station, and what they do there is they would fire a laser at the moon, a big green laser, and I was there one night watching it, and the laser goes out up into the air, and you can see it going up into the air, and then about 2 seconds later, which is the light travel time from the moon, you see on the monitor coming from the telescope, you see a small flash coming from the position where the mirror is on the moon. So they use that to actually measure the distance to the moon very precisely, and I did see the flash on the monitor. So that's the only personal evidence that I can give you that, I mean, there is something sitting on the moon, whether it was the astronauts put it there or not, but yeah.
We shall discuss these two issues one at a time, starting with moon rocks. After all, as Jay Windley puts it,
the lunar surface samples returned by the Apollo missions are considered by many to be the most compelling evidence that the missions were authentic.
One of the more obnoxious of the pro-NASA individuals is a webmaster who at this stage can only be identified as Red Zero. On his website, Red Zero had this to say regarding lunar samples.
The Apollo astronauts brought back to Earth some rocks from the moon. We know for certain that they came from the moon. 100% certain. They are like nothing else on Earth, and they couldn't have been constructed artificially because they bear the evidence of billions of years exposed to a vacuum, high energy cosmic rays, tiny asteroids, and virtually no water. Nothing on Earth could have replicated this, either naturally or man-made.
Zero is factually incorrect to say that these rocks are like nothing else on Earth. On page 117 of the National Geographic Picture Atlas of Our Universe, written by Roy A. Gallant in 1980, we find this statement. Maybe the Moon and the Earth were formed at the same time, out of the same gas and dust. The same elements are found on both. Calcium, aluminium, titanium, magnesium, silicon, oxygen, iron, but in far different proportions. The most significant element of all is oxygen. It is universally known that the Moon has no atmosphere, therefore it has no free oxygen. This means that any oxygen found in the lunar samples would have to be chemically combined with the other elements that these rocks are composed of. This is the very definition of the term oxidation. This will become important a bit later. During the production of this video, I received a private message from YouTube user Mr. Craig41. These are his exact words.
Moon samples have a chemistry and mineralogy virtually identical to Earth materials, except for one big difference. They all lack any trace of, contact with, or alteration by water.
This statement has been echoed all over the internet, but in actuality, it is simply false to say that the lunar samples contain no water. On July 9th, 2008, Space.com announced that water has been found conclusively for the first time inside ancient moon samples brought back by Apollo astronauts. The discovery may force scientists to rethink the lunar past and future. This is in direct contradiction to the claims of many propagandists.
The astronauts, over the course of 6 missions, brought back 800 pounds of rocks and dust from the moon. And this stuff is really weird. I mean, it's clearly not formed on the Earth. You can go through all the scientific analysis and say, yes, this stuff clearly was formed in a low-gravity, waterless environment. It has all...
On Jay Windley's site,
lunar rocks are anhydrous. They contain no water, and there is no evidence of the presence of water in their formation.
And on Robert Brannig's website,
terrestrial rocks have unique characteristics not found in the moon rocks, such as weathering and exposure to water.
Interestingly, it seems that the Space.com article is nothing new. In February 2001, Dr. Mark Norman of the University of Tasmania had this to say when interviewed for Science at NASA. Lunar samples have almost no water in their crystal structure. There is a huge difference between almost no water and no water. When I first saw this article, it seemed odd to me that the scientific community could have missed the presence of water all these years. And with Dr. Norman's statement long predating this discovery, we have to conclude that NASA and the propagandists have known all these years about the water in the moon rocks, and they intentionally misled the public into believing otherwise. Especially Robert Brannig, as he posted a link to this very Science at NASA article and then still claimed that there was no water in the moon rocks. He also posted a link to Red Zero's site, who states the exact same thing as Dr. Norman, that the moon rocks contain almost no water. Phil Plait also posted a link to Zero's site, meaning that he too told us that there was no water in the rocks when he knew that there was.
The astronauts, over the course of 6 missions, brought back 800 pounds of rocks and dust from the moon. And this stuff is really weird. I mean, it's clearly not formed on the Earth. You can go through all the scientific analysis and say, yes, this stuff clearly was formed in a low-gravity, waterless environment. It has all...
Finally, in August of 2007, a member from the Bad Astronomy forums posted a link to a NASA site that stated that there was almost no water in the moon rock's molecular structure. Jay Windley responded, stating,
as a matter of raw observation, lunar samples have always shown a barely detectable amount of water.
This is not what Windley told us on his website. Instead, he told us the exact opposite. Not once, but twice.
Lunar soil has no wind or water. Lunar rocks are anhydrous. They contain no water, and there is no evidence of the presence of water in their formation.